We are soon going to start our side event on urban resilience, climate resilience, ensuring equity and justice. So if you are here to hear interesting presentation and input, please take your seats. We still have 3 minutes to start our side event, so please bear with us. Thank you. Thanks for joining a very vibrant panel comprising of representatives from South Asian countries. So the topic of today's side event is climate resilience, ensuring equity and justice for poor in urban development. And why we felt that we should be talking about it is because urban area is normally seen as an opportunity to harness mitigation potential. But urban area is also a destination for those who are impacted from climate impacts, and they are forced to migrate because they have lost their lives, they have lost their livelihoods, their income has shrunk, and that's why they have to move to cities to make living. And in cities, normally they are unskilled workers rather than skilled farmers back at home. So we really want to bring that issue of equity and justice in this forum. We have a very diverse panel bringing various perspectives, and the way we are organized is we will invite Nakul from CAN South Asia to give an overview of the topic. What I have mentioned as an introduction, he'll elaborate it on further, and then we will have country case studies from Nepal, from India, from Bangladesh, from Pakistan, and then we will request Madeleine to basically link it with international negotiations, how it goes. So it's a 90-minute. We will have, and we'll try to make it as interactive as possible. So if you have any questions, please note it down. We'll open panel for Q&A later on. So in today's panel, we have Honorable Member Mayor in Council, Vashist ji from Kolkata Municipal Corporation. He's also an elected representative, member Legislative Assembly in West Bengal. And then we have, we are waiting for Manjeet, but then we have Miss Khodeja Sultana from Lopa, from Country Director, Dikonia. Then we have Hina Aslam from Research Fellow, SDPI. We have Dr. Liaquat Ali, BRAC's Urban Development, Climate Change and Risk, Disaster Risk Reduction Director. And then we have Madeleine from Misereor, and we are waiting for Manjeet from Climate Analytics to join soon from Nepal. But I think let's start already, and I'll invite Nakul, Program Coordinator from Climate Action Network South Asia, to take the floor. Thank you.
Hello, am I audible? Okay, perfect. So thank you, Sanjay sir, and thank you guys for coming in, to all the participants and to my all respected panelists. So as the discussion is about on urbanization, cities and poor, I think the first image that you can see on the screen speaks a lot. This is a image of how our South Asian cities have been tackling the hindsight of development that we should say. The basic objective of this discussion today is to understand and to deliberate how we can undo the development which has been done in a haphazard way, and then also to understand how climate change is a risk enhancer, how it has enhanced the risk for all the communities, whosoever is an inhabitant of our cities, how climate change is impacting their day-to-day life, day-to-day choices, and so on and so forth. So I'll start with my presentation will speak about 3 points mainly. We try to understand why vulnerability of cities is important. Then we'll come to the issue of vulnerability of urban poor. And then at last we'll come on the issue of climate justice and how building resilience for urban poor could be done at the local level, at the city level, and why is it important, what are the steps that we need to take. Basically starting off, vulnerability of South Asian city, and this is not only about South Asian city, this is the story of most of the cities that we live in global South, be it South Asia or any other part of the world. We all know that urbanization is defining this century. day-to-day basis, we can see a mass influx of people, in terms of job, in terms of economic opportunity, in terms of services, coming from rural areas, from peri-urban areas into the, urban sector. These are economic opportunities. Then there is another discussion which goes on, people are being pushed out also of their, native places because of the impacts of climate change, irreversible impact of climate change, loss and damage on agriculture, and so on and so forth. So these are, separate conversations which are happening, but right now we are focusing on our urbanization. A ballpark figure says roughly around 70 million people globally move from their native places to cities and urban spaces everywhere. In South Asia, this is a very similar terms. In fact, in countries like Pakistan, in Bangladesh, this figure is far more bigger. The percentage of people, in real terms. More than half of the grey stock, we call it grey because it's mostly unsustainable, it's high carbon building stock, which will exist in 2050 is yet to be built. We are in a position that high urbanization and city structures are yet to come up. And of course, it's a reality and a fact, we must face it, that pressures on cities to provide urban infrastructure, services and safe lands for all its inhabitants, it's putting so much of pressure on all of these cities that cities are crumbling under these pressures. Cities, especially in South Asia, since this is most of the South Asian panel, this is highly vulnerable to climate change. The AR6 report recently, in 2022, underlined and make these facts explicit. There are a few indicators that, if you want, I can touch upon. South Asia has the highest number of unorganized sector people working, even higher than the sub-Saharan Africa. So if you have people which do not have security of livelihood, jobs and earning, then their capacity to absorb risk and impacts multiplies. So that's one of the factors, that's one of the socio-economic factors which, disproportionately enhances the vulnerability of urban poor and the poorest of poor in South Asia. Why cities are highly vulnerable? It's a known fact. Cities from decades or centuries ago has been made in areas which are near to river, which are near to coastal areas because of trade, and n number of factors had been decided near to fresh water. Now these locations of cities is what makes them really vulnerable. Climate change is making it impacts very visible on all of these natural resources. So we see in our rivers, flash floods are coming, high intensity rainfall is coming. Cities in seismic zones are there. So n number of natural and climate change induced factors are there, which makes our cities vastly vulnerable to various issues and its inhabitants also. Moving on, to understand what types of vulnerabilities are there and how vulnerability impacts, people, various sectors within a city. First is built environment. When climate change impacts, it impacts the infrastructure, it impacts the road, it impacts the transmission line, it impacts the water system, sewerage line, everything. Natural environment, as I said, it impacts the green area of a city, so on and so forth. It also impacts the residents, and within the residents of the city, it is the urban poor which are disproportionately impacted by climate change. It's a known fact that climate change and its impact on cities is, of course, as I said earlier, is because that cities have a very high density of assets which generate livelihood, assets which generate the GDP, assets which generate the income, and of course the density of population. So it's a known fact that climate change will have its impacts on in higher amount compared to other geographic areas when it comes to cities. There have been multiple effects also, I should not say, and we should not claim that this is the first effort to highlight this problem. There have been multiple effects which have tried to look into what are the factors, what are the indicators which enhance the risk. multiple studies, multiple frameworks by various multilateral institutions have been done. And most of them, indicate in one direction that, of course, it is a certainty, risk is increasing, and especially risk is increasing for residents and for the poorest of poor, along with infrastructure and along with the, other factors and sectors in urban areas. Coming on to the main, centerpiece of this discussion, vulnerability of urban poor. We all know, as we have spoken, vulnerability, the poorest of the poor lives on the front line. They are most affected because, as an example, why I say they live on the front line is that even low intensity events, for an example, you take the case of the northern plains of India and Pakistan. The average mean temperature in this summer was around 48 to 49 degrees Celsius. For most of us, people living in middle class and higher rich class, we can afford ACs, we can afford fans, but most of the urban poor, those who have to go out every day, sweat out and earn their livelihood, you can feel what those, low intensity and high frequency day-to-day events can lead to. Similarly, the case of, the slides very well highlights that most of the urban poor, have to settle in places which are affordable to them. And these are not necessarily the places which are of high economic value. These are affordable places because land in those places are, cheapest of the cheapest. These could be steep hillsides, floodplains, settlements near city drainage outlets, and so on and so forth. In such places, even small intensity of rainfall can become a flood-like situation. So you have normal rainfall events also creating havoc for urban poor and making life difficult while comparing to other inhabitants of the city. And then, of course, it increases the risk of water scarcity, contamination, vector-borne diseases, impacts on gender equality. All those development challenges comes with one set of problems is not solved. Just to showcase, these pictures highlight, a very common sight that we face every day in South Asia. The picture to your extreme right, and to my extreme left is you can see the dichotomy. At one end, there are high-end or high-rise buildings where people of middle class use air conditioners, use fans, and they have all the services at their disposal. And at the same, within the vicinity, there are slums. So within a city, we also had to understand within this discussion that even if the cities are GDP generator, even if the cities are high-intensity contributor to the overall national emissions of any state, there are sections of the society which do not have to do anything at all. People are just living at the margins. Another picture which on the extreme left at the top corner shows complete absence of sanitation services, no water supply system, no water disposal system, no sanitation services are there. And of course, the fact of, in most South Asian cities, you can see how, roads are being blocked by various just the last factor and the last slide that I would want this discussion to build upon is that cities should be the driver of, climate action, addressing urban risk. And why I say so and how it should be done is that we require strong institution and governance approaches which synergize at local level. It could be district level, it could be cities level, urban governance, urban institutions level. And the approach that we can take is that it has to be a climate-centric or a climate justice-based approach. Understanding risk of the city, we have to start with that. We have to understand how built environment, natural resources, how residents are being impacted on day-to-day basis, how their choices are being manipulated. Of course, this has to be driven by scientific data and data-driven. Integrating climate change and disaster, localizing the post-2015 development framework, where we integrate Paris Agreement goals, Kennedy framework, and the SDGs. Justice has to be the centerpiece and the fulcrum of all the decision making. Evidence suggests that proactive planning and resilience building is I do not want to read away from the text, but we have multiple evidence which suggests that, if we invest in proactive planning, then we saves a lot on disaster response. So that has to be the main, takeaway from my discussion. And of course, at the last, finance has to be made available with all the urban local bodies and institutions. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Nakul. Thank you for managing in the time allocated. And thanks for making a very stronger case on why vulnerability of cities need to be addressed, and then how cities can play an important role in achieving nationally determined contributions. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Manjeet Dhakal from Climate Analytics. He is the Regional Director of Climate Analytics, and he's also board member of Clean Energy Nepal, a CANSA member organization. And we request Manjeet to share with him the architecture or landscape of urbanization in Nepal, and how initiatives and actions at city level can be officially accounted to national and subsequently can become UNFCCC agenda item. Manjeet, you have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Sanjay. Good afternoon, colleagues. It's not easy in this venue to come from the other side of the negotiation and finding rooms. But yeah, thanks for the opportunity. So this year, I think, as we all know, the South Asia has gone far from experiencing the unprecedented extreme weather events, from the floods in Pakistan, the heat waves, and the landslide. And many of these impacts have disseminated the infrastructure in the urban and the rural area, also have wiped out the agriculture that were ready to be harvested in many countries. And there were many scientific reports, many analyses done how these extreme events were attributed to the climate impact. So there is no doubt in terms of many of these impacts which were exaggerated and which were directly attributed to the climate impact. So I come from Nepal, Nepal being one of the 10th urbanized country in the world. However, it is also the top 10, the farthest urbanized country. And when what we have experienced is the way the rapid urbanization come through. There will be a willingness in terms of looking at the opportunities, but these opportunities, when the focus remain more on the opportunities, there are also the challenges that we face because of our the planning practices, because of our priorities in terms of fund allocation, and many other challenges that we have faced as of now, that link to the how to manage the slum population in the urban area, the overcrowding in term, and that link to the sanitation, the access of clean water, and so on, and also linked to the open sewage management and so on. So whenever we see any extreme rainfall in the cities, nowadays the roads in the cities get flooded, that we have experienced in many of our capital city, because they were not designed in a concept that the temperature will rise this way. We will be experiencing the adverse impact of climate change, and the frequency of extreme event will keep on rising. So since our development development practices were not envisioned in that way, many of these developing countries in the region obviously has been facing these challenges. Yeah. So it is obvious, like the way to link it with some of the discussions that we are having here in the negotiations. If we are not able to limit the global average temperature rise to 1.5 degree, the South Asia will be the one facing the huge impact. This time it was also recognized as one of the reason in the latest IPCC report, because of the fragile geography, because of the huge amount of poor population we have, because our infrastructure are not they are not in a way adjusted with the extreme events that we have been facing, and also the priority in terms of the development needs and the funds that has to be allocated because of the absence of the international fund when they are required. For example, when we have experienced the the extreme flooding in Nepal, and whenever there are such events, we obviously will not have a time to start writing proposal to the fund that has been established in this process, because the fund has to be, the community has to be served immediately. So in that context, we also feel that the climate change fund that has been established in this process are obviously not fit for propose to the loss and damage that the countries are experiencing. So that links to one of the biggest discussion that we are having here, calling for the funding arrangement, a finance facility that can serve as an operating entity of the finance mechanism to be established here in Sharma. We are given assurance in many of the discussion that, okay, we have started the discussion on loss and damage finance, and that's what we have to celebrate. Obviously, that does not make sense. Well, we have to report back to our communities back home. We can't go and say that, okay, we agree to discuss for next 3 years. So something has to be materialized here, and that is about establishing the fund so that it can serve the communities back home. The other additional thing in the negotiation related to the urban issues that we are discussing here is also in the global stocktake. In the World Cafe, which is the innovative approach of the global stocktake, the urban area was one of the topic that was discussed this time, and that was a new addition to the discussion that we used to have last time. So obviously, including CANSA, many of the organizations who have supported to profile up the concern and the linkage of the urban issues with the climate change. I think credit goes to CANSA and other organizations as well. But having said all this, the difficulties that we are facing and the challenges that we have in the negotiation with regards to limiting temperature to 1.5 degree, the fund to be mobilized on loss and damage, including the excess of climate finance that our countries are facing. There are also some examples of the leadership that our countries have demonstrated. If we just take an example of the fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty, so the city in Nepal near to the capital city Kathmandu called Dhulikhel was one of the first city to endorse the non-fossil fuel proliferation treaty, followed by another municipality named Ithari in the eastern part of the country, and now we feel very proud that the many other cities in the region has followed that footstep. So from the South Asia region, our cities have also shown that leadership to the international community, that we want to participate in this process in terms of climate solution, and we call also for the international community to act accordingly. Yeah, so that's where we are. So Sanjay, if there are any question, Nakul, I'm happy to go further, but let me in my remarks here. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Manjeet. And certainly from Global South, we have certainly set the ball rolling, because Dhulikhel, Ithari, and after Dhulikhel and Ithari, fossil fuel treaty has been endorsed by Kolkata city also, and we have Honorable Mayor in Council, Member of Legislative Assembly also, Mr. Devashish Kumar with us, whom we request, because Nakul also pointed about governance approach. So let's hear from him the governance approach that Kolkata municipality is following, irrespective of the vulnerabilities that city faces.
Thank you, Sanjay. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you everyone present here. Thanks to COP and CANSA. Everyone, we know that Kolkata is one of the most climatically vulnerable city. That's why being a administrator of corporation, we try to adopt some policy. Since Ayla, and also in case of Amphan, we saw the amount of impact on the city, and it is only going to get bigger. And IPCC also says that Kolkata is the third city after Delhi and Karachi, is a very climatically vulnerable city. day by day, the city, Kolkata's temperature is gradually raised. Last 6 decades, definitely the water level also rise. So Kolkata is a very climatically vulnerable city. We know acknowledge climate change impact as a major issue, and it's not only a physical threat but also our question of development. So we try to introduce the alternative source of energy to replace the use of fossil fuels, which is delicate link to the global climate change. We introduce the solar power, solar energy. We have many reasons to take climate action to improve our health and reduce the risks human beings. The future impact of the climate change depends on how much nations reduce the greenhouse gas emissions and adapt the climate change, limiting the global temperature rise and adapting the climate change impacts. I have been the position of the head the Park and Gardens and Environment as a member mayor in council for last 12 years in Kolkata, West Bengal, India, taking a lot of steps to the climate impact of my city. Plantation report of the city of Kolkata from the past 2 to 3 years. Plantation made during the year 2020-21, amount is 28,000. Plantation made during 2020 and 23, amount is 75,000. Plantation made in the green verge, different places of the city between August to October 22, approximate green area created 4,500 square meters and plantation is 38,000. Program for plantation to be made in the proposed green buffer between November 22 to March 23. It's 1,25,000 and approximate green area will be created 19,000 square meter. The Kolkata Municipal Corporation under my department was one of the first to take initiative in Kolkata to introduce the solar power lights to parks and gardens of Kolkata. As a renewable source of power, solar energy has an important role in reducing greenhouse gas and emission and mitigating climate change, which is critical to protecting humans, wildlife and ecosystems. The first initiative of Kolkata Municipal Corporation taken by me was for battery operating vehicles for movement, solid waste. In solid waste management, emissions from battery operated vehicles up to emission up to 43% lower than diesel vehicles. They emit fewer greenhouse gases and air pollution than control or diesel variations. Kolkata as a world ranking was one of the top listed in population density. In the parameter city area event 2018, population estimate shows the population of Kolkata is 1,46,81,000 and the density of the population 21,935 per square kilometer. So, density of population, we are doing better with where our city of joy Kolkata under the leadership of the respected Srimati Mamata Banerjee, the Chief Minister of West Bengal, has maintained the climate standards, environment standards, urban forestry standards and air quality. We are the first city we introduced already the urban forestry and definitely we try to plantation more. As we are working the aggregating of the green safeguards by the plantation by the Kolkata Municipal Corporation, Kolkata with the Green City Mission, with the help of our Honorable Chief Minister Srimati Mamata Banerjee for the reducing harmful emissions including smoke, dust, soot, salts, acids and metals. We are attempting to reduce the fine particles matter and fine particles matter. particulate matter. PM 2.5 and PM 10. My political party, All India Trinamool Congress, and my leader, Honorable Chief Minister Srimati Mamata Banerjee's principle and belief for Ma Mati Manush, that's a mother, Mother Earth and its people. So Kolkata, the city of joy, the heritage city, the cultural capital of India, and the city of 6 Nobel laureates. Kolkata shall soon become the paradigm of climate change impact in the world. You know the Kolkata produced 6 Nobel laureates, so it's a big heritage. Thanking again to all the attendees and the participants of the 2022 United Nations Climate Change Conference, COP27. And definitely thanks to the CANSA, they will all extend their support to our Kolkata for this fight against the climate, this carbon emission and others issue. And definitely we also try to hold a COP. COP means not for party, COP means conference of the people. We'll definitely, I talk to our leaders, our authorities for holding this COP in Kolkata. And definitely we try to assemble all our stakeholders, and with all help of our stakeholders, we try to our city green or more green. And definitely we took the pledge that against the fossil fuels. And I hope CANSA extend their support to fight against fossil fuels. And definitely we try to introduce solar or alternative energy against these fossil fuels. And definitely with the help of CANSA, we save our own favorite and great city. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And CAN South Asia is also committed to work with you to ensure that we have a climate resilient and carbon neutral city plan for Kolkata. Well, we heard from Nakul, we heard from Vashist sir also, and we also heard from Manjeet about vulnerable communities. And women are at the forefront in terms of impacts being faced. And I would like to invite Ms. Khodeja Sultana Lopa ji, Country Director, Dikonia, Bangladesh, to actually share how to ensure gender equality as core of climate actions in urban development. Ma'am, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry, it's a bit low. Okay. Okay, I'm Khodeja Sultana. I'm the country director for Dikonia in Bangladesh. We are I'd like to give a very brief introduction to our organization. We are a Sweden-based international NGO. In Bangladesh, we are working mostly on gender equality, rights, and resilience. And I'd like to thank CANSA for inviting me to share about importance of gender perspectives into climate resilient urban development. And I'm very happy that on this day, this is the Gender Day for the COP27. On this day, I've got this opportunity to make this presentation. You know, Bangladesh is a small country, South Asian country, and it is home to more than 166 million people. Unfortunately, we are living in a climate crisis, and many people, they are actually at risk of displacement. We are facing different types of natural hazards every year. You can see flood, cyclone, thunderstorm, waterlogging, drought, salinity. I think almost every one we have in our Bangladesh. And it is not once, it is several times a year. This repeated destruction, actually it is causing our livelihoods, infrastructure, and communities. They're forcing people to leave their homes, and also mostly they are moving to towns, most of them are moving to different towns. And also, we have our adaptation, different adaptation interventions are there, but adaptation also has some limit. People, how much people can adapt. So at some point, they are actually moving to many different places, mostly in cities like Dhaka. And in Dhaka, according to our one of the study, it is 1,000 to 2,000 people are actually moving to Dhaka every day. So this huge number of people, they are they don't want to shift, but they have to shift because of the situation climate related induced disasters has caused. And most of these people, I said, most of them people in cities, they ended up in informal settlements. And these informal settlements, these are already overcrowded, and there are lack of basic services, poor sanitation facilities. I'll show you, and these and you can see most of the people are here. Around 3.4 million people are living in the slum areas. This is a huge number of people. But these people are not same. There are men, women, there are boys, girls, but one thing is common for them, that there are differences between women and men is in every slum, every community, everywhere. And mostly women are the impacted. And I would not say that often we say that women are the most vulnerable to the climate change effects. But I would say women are not vulnerable, women are made exploited or made marginalized. For this reason, women are facing challenges. And effects of climate change, so we say that effects of climate change is not gender blind, they are more hostile against women and girls. They are affected. Why they are affected? They are affected mostly due to gender-based violence, typical social roles are there, discrimination among sexes, and low or over-representation in decision-making process. And also their environmental experience of both women and men are different, but these are not utilized properly. I'll show you some photos in our urban slum. You can see a lady over there. Usually in our slums, women are have double burden. They are working at home. They are engaged in reproductive roles and also at the productive roles. So they are also earning income earners in their families. And also, if we say that in our many women are working in the ready-made garments industry, their working hours is sometimes including home and in their factories, it is more than sometimes it's 16 to 20 hours. Now it is also in our slum areas, there is also there are access to water and sanitation. These are highly limited and also sometimes very costly compared to other city areas because of the threshold is there. And also another problem women and girls face especially in the slum areas, there is high income insecurity. Many engages are in household activities and they feel like this is a loss of dignity. And many are also engaged in garments industry, many in construction site, and also, but not, it is not that everyone is getting a job even if they want to. So many of them are also jobless. Here is one of the lady, Miss Josna. I have met, I think earlier this month. She is one of the newcomer to a slum. She had taken loan, but now she cannot pay. Some disaster, some situations, climatic situation in her village. Now she is living in Dhaka, leaving her children in the village. But she is trying to find a job, yet she has not got any job. And she hopes that sometime she can reunite with her family. And gender-based violence, this is prevalent in our slum areas, mostly along with rape and also other sexual harassment and stalking. These are very common in our areas where we work. And we know these are actually not, these are not right, these are wrong and not justice. And in this situation, we cannot, if this situation continues, we cannot actually reach the SDG targets we are committed to. I have listed here several SDGs, but all the SDGs will be affected, but here are some SDGs which are directly linked to urban development. Gender equality, clean water and sanitation, sustainable cities and communities, and climate action. All of these are actually interlinked. For example, if we look into gender equality, all forms of violence against women and girls, that is linked to also safe and inclusive, accessible public space, especially for if we want to achieve sustainable cities and communities. Also, we want that public services, infrastructure, and social protection, these are also highly linked to 11.1 SDG. So we have to actually upgrade the slums. And also this is linked to clean water and sanitation. And both, all these, SDG 5 and 11, they consider participation as a central issue. But access to public spaces is another supporting target, and free movement. If we don't have this, women cannot actually have a good participation, qualitative participation and leadership role in this, in their decision-making processes. So they all push us to planning, urban planning from gender perspective. This is very important. And what do we mean by urban planning from gender perspective? It is inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable private and public spaces for all women, men, girls, and boys. And it should be adequate, affordable, accessible, safe, and sustainable housing, basic services, and transport system that we are looking for. Also, we want to take part in decision-making process. Also, we want to protect and safeguard natural heritage. And regarding COP27, this is the COP27, loss and damage financing. We consider that this should, when there will be a loss and damage fund, we consider this should compensate loss and damage incurred by displaced people, especially women and girls. Sometimes this is not yet, this is in process, but of course, sometimes it will be there, the climate damage, loss and damage finance. Sometimes it is mentioned that it is a secondary or tertiary target, but I think it should be not the first priority to compensate these people. And loss and damage finance, they should also address impacts that result in poverty, inequality, socio-cultural discrimination, gender-based violence, involuntary migration, and denial of marginalized people rights. These are very important that we consider for loss and damage finance, especially in related to urban development from gender perspective. And we consider that gender equality should be the center point of urban development in order to respond to climate change-induced displacements. Otherwise, it would be a compromise to enjoying rights to life, basic services, live a dignified life, education, protection, housing, culture, and property, for instance. So we think we should act urgently for climate justice and for gender justice. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for making a stronger case and the actions that we need to work towards to ensure gender equality. I would also like to invite Dr. Liaquat Ali from BRAC, who is going to share the role that CSOs and think tank can play in urban transformation. And Bangladesh is a case study, right, sir? You have floor.
Thank you. When we are talking about urban, the context and the canvas is so big because, you know, when there is a precipitation of 333 millimeter for a 6 hour, so you can imagine how difficult it is for the authorities or utility service provider to manage these kind of things. Because when we are dealing with climate change and its impact, things are not static, because I can give one example because this year in Bangladesh, we have an area, we call it flash flood area or Haur area. It is the northeast part of the Bangladesh. It is very near to Cherrapunji. So almost every year we are facing or we are receiving flash flood. But we are accustomed with this kind of scenario. But when it's come early, it gives us problem. But this year, it's come late, but come with a 122 years record event of climate change. Why? 970 millimeter rainfall occur within 24 hours in Cherrapunji. And within Bangladesh, 4 districts receive more than 300 millimeter rainfall. So can you imagine to tackle this kind of scenario in the coming days? Because dealing climate resilience or dealing climate change impact, you have to make trend analysis. So every time you are receiving one big thing, and then you have to recalculate your trend, so that otherwise you will miss something. So the canvas is so big, so I will focus only, especially the slum area. Because as a BRAC, we are dealing in 20 slum area. 20 urban districts. 12 of them is city corporation and 8 of them is municipality. You see, dealing in urbans, we found there is some gaps. Say for example, first and foremost, we found the resource gap. The financial resource, capacity resource, human resource, we are finding this kind of gap. And I already started with the shock and stress. These are due to disaster and also related to climatic shock. Because in slum area, especially in Bangladesh, without having the impact of climate change, we have some other disasters like fire. Especially in winter season, we are experiencing severe flood or fire incidents occur, and it gives big blow to the slum dwellers. At the beginning, the presentation given by Nakul, he rightly pointed out to manage a unplanned city is much difficult than to develop a new city. Because we are dealing and we are trying to do something in a developed or unplannedly developed city, which is even much more difficult. And the other gap is the inclusiveness, because the APA already mentioned about the gender inclusion, but I like to point it out here. There are other groups also, disability, and also some other ethnic minority is also a big factor. Actually, what we try to do, we try to come up a model is called CSO, local government institution and community-driven model, because we try to bring the community at the center, at the lead, and try to build their capacity and try to form a community group. And after that, we try to develop integration between the service they are needed in the slum. Say for example, water, sanitation, road, communication, health. So this kind of service communication we want to try to provide. But if you want to tell what we do in related to climatic aspects, there are things like we try to build low-cost, resilient housing in the urban context. Because when there is a heavy rain, definitely the settler face difficulty for the water logging or drainage congestion. So we try to build house in such a way it does not get inundated during flood. And also, we try to give them a better environment, because if you go and visit it, I think all of you know, there is a room of 10 feet by 10 feet made of GI sheet. During heat wave, they face serious difficulty to live there. So we try to provide open space or provide much more window, and we come up with a paint so that it can absorb heat during heat wave. And also in the slum area, there is a huge problem of illegal connection of electricity and the cooking gas connection. So we try to develop a community-based kitchen where it will be solar-based, and series of stoves there, and people come and cook and then go. So it will adaptation come mitigation. So we try to these kind of things. And especially the slums are located in low-lying areas, so definitely there will be flood if there is a heavy rain. So when we try to construct a road, we try to make a trend analysis so that it does not get inundated during flood. And also we try to use perforated brick, not CC concrete, because if you do it concrete, it cannot have the facility to water percolation. So if you use in the middle a row of percolated brick, it can allow you to seepage through aquifer research. So it can be converted into a nature-based solution. And also, we think not only in rural area, maybe in urban area, we can actually go for agriculture. Because we started during COVID, we realized they have no jobs, factories are shut down. What they can do? We provide them vegetable seeds and they grow, and during that COVID period, they are able to eat themselves and they can sell it into the market. So that is also mitigation cum adaptation benefit. So we try to provide the knowledge and capacity to the local government authority because they actually suffer, they don't have enough staff. I can give one example. In Dhaka city, which is the most largest city corporation, now it is 2 cities, north and south. They don't have enough staff to deal the slum dwellers. They have only one officer, slum development officer. Other than that, they don't have anything. So we try to develop their capacity and try to help them so that they can mobilize or they can plan accordingly. Because if you want to plan climate change aspect, you have to have knowledge, you have to know the context and future possibilities, how it's going to affect you. So, and also, you see, to tackle that, already previous presenter mentioned about the migration. You know, there is a World Bank report, it states every day there are 2,000 people moving from rural to urban, and significant portion of them come to the Dhaka city. And if it is continue, it will be difficult. So that's why we thought maybe we can come up with a financial modalities so that side by side with the government as well as with the local government institution, we can develop a model. So we developed a fund mechanism. It's called CBF, Climate Bridge Fund. So that was actually a kind of model. You have an initial fund we received from KFW. We invested that fund into local market, and from that investment we get interest, and with that interest we call for proposal for the implementation in the urban area. Definitely it has to be climate migrant and it has to be urban context. So in that way we are giving local government authorities some cushion and flexibility so that they can test their model, even go for bigger scale in the later stage. And this is actually a local-led adaptation approach. And also, we try to develop a model or try to develop a climate migrant-friendly city. So we took a project with the funding from Global Center on Adaptation. We don't choose Dhaka city because the rank and status of the Dhaka city mayor is equivalent to minister. Sometimes if you dealing with the governance issue, it is difficult to reach them when you need. So that's why we choose a small town, because after the inauguration of Padma Bridge, so you know the city become it's a port city. It's become getting much more attention. More and more peoples are going there. Lots of industries growing. So there are more migrants. Climate migrants are coming. So we try to develop a climate migrant town there. It's a pilot. If it is successful, we have a plan for 8 years. We will replicate in 25 other cities. So that is also actually we are following the 8 principle of local-led adaptation. And also every decision, every planning that has to come from the mayor of the municipality, in Mongla municipality. We are giving the technical support, we are giving the financial support initially, and we are also helping him to plan. Because in Bangladesh, we have a lot of plans, strategies in place in relation to urban. Very recently, we passed the DAP, Detailed Area Plan for Dhaka. So the setback is all the plan does not have incorporated the climatic aspect in the coming days ahead. So again, we have to think, we have to work with them so that it can be climate friendly and climate friendly. Thank you very much.
Thank you. From BRAC. Now we heard Nepal, we heard India, we heard Bangladesh, and we also saw in horror the flood situation in Pakistan. We have Hina, who will give her first account of flood situation and how cities tried, what kind of impact you all faced, and how cities tried to cope, or what are the plans of Pakistan government ahead.
All right, thank you so much to CANSA, Sanjay, Nakul, the whole team. Very pleased to be here and presenting the case for Pakistan. I think I have been put at the right place where we have heard about what kind of, what does it mean by cities, resilience, the climate change, urbanization. And I think all of us are quite aware of the fact that the recent floodings in Pakistan has shown us that how critical it is to talk about shifting towards ways, strategies, and implementing policies and finances for the livable communities, for the powerful communities in terms of health, in terms of poverty, in terms of income. So what we see in Pakistan is a huge cost related to the impacts that we are facing, and I'm going to present on that. So we have heard that at the global level, there's a huge increasing trend in the urbanization, urban and rural. So there's a trend in the migration from rural to urban. At the global level, and if we come down to the South Asia, it is expected to be increased to around 250 million by 2030. And Pakistan has the highest number, more than half to be living in cities by 2025. If we look at the rural poverty rate of Pakistan, it's at 43.5%. It's more than twice as high as the urban poverty, 18.5%. as per the data of 2018. And it ranks amongst the 38th, 22nd, 26th, and 31st below the global median on the resilience, inclusion, sustainability, and efficiency dimensions. If we look at the proportion of the urban population as compared to the other South Asian countries, we see that the Pakistan is nearly standing towards the, is nearly amongst the topmost with an increasing trends that we foresee to have by 2050. So there are many numbers that you could see on the screen. So we have a huge population, more than 23 million, and it's around 2.83% of the total population that we have in Pakistan, ranking amongst the top 5 countries and dependencies by population. with 35.1% living in urban, and the median age to around 22.8. Looking at these cities by population, the Karachi is the most populated city of Pakistan, followed by Lahore, Faisalabad, Rawalpindi, and coming down to Quetta in the south part of the country. I'm sure that all of you must have seen this vulnerability index map, where it's quite evident that South Asia and Pakistan ranks one of the top most vulnerable country according to the German Watch Vulnerability Index. It was by UNFCCC that the impacts could slash up to 9% of the South Asian economy every year by the end of this century, and the human and the financial toll could be higher if the damages from the floods, droughts, and the other extreme events is included. And if we looked at the numbers from Pakistan as for 2020 report, it was already mentioning that Pakistan has lost 0.53% of per unit GDP, suffered economic losses of worth more than 37,000 million, and witnessed around 152 extreme events. That is the data I'm talking about, 99 to 2018, and I'm going to take it forward to where we are standing at the moment. As per 2021 report of the World Bank and the ADB, it was estimated that Pakistan will be bearing a cost of 3.8 billion a year due to climate change. And yet, another cost that we see of climate change impacts in 2020 in the form of the heat waves that we have witnessed in this summers. So one of the hottest temperature ever recorded on the earth was in April, and Pakistan soared up to scorching 49 degrees in Jacobabad. Heat waves, more than 700,000 people were affected in north and central Punjab. Intensified frequency in the droughts, livestock starvation, famine. And in January 2019, there were 3 million people in Sindh and 1.8 million people in Balochistan were affected with a drop of annual precipitation by 24.4%. If we look at the glacier lake outburst floods, the northern Pakistan has been facing for the last decade. An estimate of the loss from the 9 landslides between 1900 and 2020 indicates a total cost of around 18 million US dollars, affecting nearly 30,000 people. That is the extent and the magnitude of the impact that we have been facing in the form of the impacts that are envisioned, that are being witnessed in Pakistan. Coming to the floods, we have a huge catastrophe this year in the form of super floods, where the most affected areas are in the south, east and the southwest, along with the north, and around 1/3 of Pakistan drowned in water this year. So more than 1,300 deaths, millions of houses damaged, roads, infrastructure, livestock, and much more. That is the satellite image that we had extracted from 27 to from August and 21 and August 22, and you could easily see the extent and the water overtaking the whole the whole side of the province, coming, dragging away all the livelihoods and the people. This is what we could see from the Indus River and the other adjacent areas and the locations around. So this year, the rain was more than 200% more than the average. And these are some of the numbers that we could see in the northern province, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa region, where there are numbers from, this is from the September figure, and where there were injuries, the houses damaged, in terms of the agricultural land damaged, health facilities, education, and a huge cost related to restoration that is estimated by the government, and that has of course changed up till now, which I will be mentioning in my new slides. In Punjab, it's the same, where we had a huge catastrophe in the form of livestock infrastructure, deaths, injuries, and much more. So the total cost of damages and losses in terms of loss of housing is around 5.6 billion, loss to agriculture, livestock around 3.7, loss in transport communication 3.3, 9 million people have been pushed into poverty, and national poverty rate is expected to increase by 3.7 to 4%, and GDP is to be declined by 2.2% for the fiscal year 2022. So there's a post-disaster needs assessment done, where the Planning Commission of Pakistan has estimated the total damages to exceed 14.9 billion and the total economic losses to reach around 15.2 billion. And estimated needs for the rehabilitation and the reconstruction in a resilient way are at least 16.3 million. The loss in the GDP as a direct impact of the floods is projected to be around 2.2% of this year. The human impact assessment says that the national poverty rate may increase by 3.7 to 4% and potentially pushing 8.4 to 9.1 million people below the poverty line. You must be thinking there are many numbers, because these are the numbers that are giving the real evidence on the magnitude of the impact that is being faced in the form of loss and the damages by Pakistan, and that is of absolute huge concern. And I think it's a matter that is being discussed at the COP and at this level, where it needs to be reiterated. While we look at the aggregated impact of climate and environmental impacts, so these are some of the climate change impacts, but if you look at the aggregated impacts of environmental risk that Pakistan is facing, it is expected that we will have a reduction in our annual GDP by 18 to 20% per year by 2050. That also includes damage from the air pollution, which is estimated to impose an additional loss of 6.5% in the cities, and will account for 15% of the increase in demand for water for domestic and industrial use, and it could reduce the GDP to another 4.6% in 2047. So we saw in the early slide, just in 2021, the estimation was Pakistan to cost 3.8 billion yearly. And today, the World Bank has just released the Climate Change Development Report, according to which, if we do not mitigate these impacts, the climate and the environmental risk could reduce Pakistan GDP by 18 to 20%, with over 300 billion will be needed through 2030 to get the country on a climate resilient and a sustainable pathway. So there are climate actions being taken by Pakistan government in terms of measures and strategies and policies, like Billion Tree Tsunami Project, the Red Plus Indus Delta, mangrove forest restoration, electric vehicles, recharge, clean green movement, and lots more. Now, linking this up, where we have had the most discussion in terms of where we are standing in terms of urban resilience. So that is, again, my own image extracted of Islamabad, where we could see the trend in the green cover from 1992 up till 2022. And it's been significantly reduced, where because of the infrastructure and a lot of urban sprawl and a lot of urbanization that is happening. The major challenges in the form of water, health, we could see that in Pakistan, out of the 20 million population, 21 million people lack access to clean water, as per the report by WaterAid 2018. And almost 20 to 30% of the hospital access and 60% of the infant fatalities are caused by the waterborne diseases. And according to the estimates, 230,000 children in Pakistan die from waterborne diseases. We just saw an image from Islamabad, and we also see a huge pressure on the resources in the form of decline in the water table, which has reduced from 12 million in 1986 to 35 in 2015, and further 11 decline is predicted by 2025. Coming to the numbers in the health, which is of course the most crucial element of living in the urban areas, and in the form of affecting the population here, there was a survey that identified that there are more than 1,200 hospitals overall in the country, and the doctor-patient ratio which is above the World Health Organization recommended level. So that means that most of the people are getting affected due to health issues. So 0.4% of the GDP is only spending on the health financing. So the pollution in the cities is of course directly linked to what we are seeing in the form of the health, in the form of the waste, the garbage that is thrown on the streets. So unhygienic conditions, the poor sanitation, that is all what we are seeing. I'm glad that a lot of pictures already shown by my colleagues in South Asian countries like Nepal and Bangladesh are very similar to what we are seeing in many parts of the urban areas in Pakistan as well. That is again the index of the 2.5 PM air pollution in Pakistan, with a lot of waste being generated by the cities, and approximately 49.6 million tons annually being generated, increasing at the rate of more than 2.4% each year. And if you look at the pie chart, Karachi 58.2%, followed by Lahore, Islamabad, Peshawar and Quetta, generating most of the waste. And most of the waste is in the form of the food waste, paper, cardboard, bricks and more. In terms of the urban mobility and energy use, there's more than, the sector is taking around 13% of the country's GDP, and the road transportation accounting for 62% of that contribution. And its 15% is mostly concentrated in the 4 largest cities, including Karachi and provincial capital. This is a provincial capital of Sindh. In terms of energy, the average per person consumption is increasing at the rate of 6 to 8% and is expected to rise by 2 to 9%. We are mostly dependent upon the thermal-based power fuel for energy generation, and being while accounting for a lot more hazardous issues and the emissions that are being caused by it. I think in terms of the country's economic situation, we have a very limited and narrow fiscal space. So the domestic finance is really low. The climate finance is again not what is to be required in terms of adaptation and mitigation. If we look at the climate investment needs, which is around $234 billion US. In the interest of time, I'm not going into more details, but I'm happy to share this presentation later on. So what is the way forward? In terms of why we need to build resilient and livable cities, is to focus on green urban mobilities, green municipal services, strengthening the urban planning and the management, and strengthening service provision and nature-based solutions being talked about. And finally, how do we focus on creating sustainable revenue streams for green and urban resilience is of the utmost importance at this point of a time. Thank you so much. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Hina. I'll move to Madeleine, our last speaker. Madeleine, you heard from 4 countries the challenges in the cities, the vulnerability also, the actions there, the solutions that exist that all are trying to adopt. So your take on how negotiations, ongoing negotiations, can address all the agenda that we have put forward. Madeleine, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. After the interventions by my dear co-panelists, we already learned about the devastating impacts of climate crisis within cities. Urban affairs open so many opportunities and needs to adequately address this climate crisis, and cities are multiple hubs of people, economic activities, and infrastructures. These are the 3 pillars we would like to address. So it is people, infrastructures, and economic activities. This year, IPCC Working Group 2 made us very sure that it is pivotal to think about adaptation and mitigation, especially in cities, in an integral way. And I'm now sharing some insights we as Misereor and the partners we are supporting gained in their contribution to sustainable city systems. And these potentials have the opportunity to unfold manifold opportunities within the different negotiation strings here in Sharm el-Sheikh, and as well for implementation as civil society. And this is the perspective I'm taking, is playing such a huge role in the implementation side in the different cities. Urbanization is seen as an irreversible process, and projections are very clear that cities will continue to grow. Urban population will almost double in all Asian countries, and there are many countries in which there is up to half of the population already living in cities, especially countries such as China, Nigeria, Congo, Pakistan, the United States, and Bangladesh carry therefore huge responsibilities to decisively use the levers in their hands to achieve the global climate goal. We at Misereor see that in cities there are social, economic, ecological, cultural, political, and religious spheres intervenes to each other, and they then form a new system. These urban systems are high energy spaces, and especially with regard to mobility, housing, and also infrastructure and working. These systems use a lot of energy. So we at Misereor speak about cities as energy systems, and this is the focal point from which I will start when I speak about the impacts and the role within these negotiations. Globally, 70% of the urban structures that will exist in 2050, and I think that's something Nakul told us before in his first intervention, have not been built yet. So there are huge levers we have in our hands to first mitigate and then second adapt to climate crisis. And yes, because of these urban infrastructures, cities open up huge windows of opportunities, and we should take them. From this model of cities as urban energy systems that are directly contributing to climate crisis, and as we have seen in the interventions from my colleague from Pakistan, also highly vulnerable to climate risks. I now present 3-fold dimensions, as previously said, oriented on people, infrastructures, and economic activities for this climate debates happening here in Sharm el-Sheikh. And in terms of infrastructure, coping risk and dangers of climate crisis must be one of the preconditions for infrastructures that are yet to be built. Where mistakes are made in the construction of infrastructures, great risks arise, especially for the poorest that don't have options to protect themselves. Here it is especially important to always consider context-specific situations of each day. And I know on the 17th in this conference there is going to be an urbanization roundtable, and I think it's pivotal that these issues are addressed there, especially in concern of public transport, rainwater harvesting and drainage systems. Then second, economic activities. Cities can unlock significant potentials in emission reduction. That's also something we have heard from my dear colleague here, who was introducing us to his solar panel concept. Colleagues working in the Misereor Asia department often mention the constantly increasing energy demand within Asian cities. In general, cities consume about 70% of a whole country's energy demand. 70%, that's a lot. These high energy systems have an important role to play in reducing emissions. This should particularly be considered in the sectors of the mitigation work program and in the NDCs of fast urbanizing countries like China, Pakistan, India, or Bangladesh. The third aspect that is really important is people, because people are living in the cities and therefore they will be affected by climate crisis, and they are also the actors and agents for change when we want to transform our cities to sustainable ones, or even create cities in a sustainable way. And many of our partners constantly prove the importance of connecting adaptation and mitigation measures in cities. And this is also important to assure social justice, where human rights are then coming in. So you are guaranteeing social justice when you're connecting adaptation and mitigation measures, and I think that's very important as key takeaway from this intervention. So social justice and especially the needs of the poorest will only be addressed if adaptation and mitigation are intertwined to each other. And apart from urgently needed finance facilities of loss and damage, what is hopefully an outcome of this conference, this is the best way to reduce the risks for the most vulnerable in cities. So, as a short summary of these points, I think it's important that we anticipate and prepare open infrastructures for an ever-worsening climate crisis, that we make use of the mitigation potentials in cities to reduce the burden of the poorest, and that we start integrating adaptation and mitigation in order to prevent structural damage and loss. And in the beginning I said that it's important that civil society is engaged in all of this. And it is because civil society can share information about different urbanization scenarios, so what's happening if we really consider these three aspects or not. And they can also showcase the important window of opportunities we have to reduce climate crisis and to really fulfill the climate goals we set out. This can be done by focus on the demanding infrastructures, and that these infrastructures will be benefiting the poorest 40% of the population. Because we know if a city is designed so that the poorest are benefiting from it, all will benefit from it. So there is only chances when we are considering the needs and the asks of the poorer people. The second role could be to monitor the infrastructure development closely. This also means to check the finance flows and the infrastructure plans. Where is all of this going in the city planning of a city? And the third aspect is to focus on the places where urbanization processes are happening. And this is mostly in small or middle-sized cities. It's not these huge cities. The cities that will grow constantly are the small and the middle-sized cities. And in these cities, that's a learning from our partners, it is possible that civil society gets involved in the planning processes and that they can also take responsibilities in managing cities and also inspire the process. For all of this, we need then new modes of cooperation, because when civil society is getting involved into the processes of city design, we need a process and we need a sort of cooperation between these two things. And I think some successes were explained by my dear colleagues during the panel. And with this, I perhaps sum up with one sentence and one outcome I already told you is that what is benefiting the poorest of a society will benefit the good life for all.
Thank you, Madeleine. Certainly, many issues are being discussed in this agenda. It's global. It needs to be converted more national and then local also. So with this, we have time to invite some questions from audience. Floor is open. Jayanta, and then Farapa. Can we have a mic, please?
Thank you, Sanjay. Very good presentations. Just 2 points I would like to make here for the consideration of the panel and also the experts who are present here. Being part of Sundarban's movement for, I think, more than a decade now, and also part of Kolkata's climate change program, part of the Kolkata's Climate and Solar Committee, which Mr. Devashish Kumar presides. I think the time is up to have a linkage between the two extremely important dimensions. If you look at Sundarbans and also look at the urban areas, not only India I'm talking about, a lot of Bangladeshi friends are here. So there is Khulna, there is Jashore, there is other cities. In India, apart from Kolkata, maybe a big city, but there are smaller cities around. So when we are talking about the loss and damage, the kind of a premise is that we are talking about only the rural areas. But number of cities are facing huge impacts. City like Kolkata has faced huge impacts from Amphan, from Ayla, from Yas and other things. What about the loss and damage in those cities? Now as this particular COP, it's very good that this particular COP on the outset has accepted loss and damage as a formal part of the negotiation. I think CANSA can take lead to assess the loss and damage of the cities around Sundarban. I also propose here, there can be a SIZ urban program. When we talk about Sundarban influential zone, it is different from Bangladesh to India because in India, Sundarban, the human habited islands and the wild islands are kind of across. You can actually swim across to a wild island from like that. But in Bangladesh it's different. I know, I have been to the Bangladesh Sundarban a number of times. But I think taking the Sundarban and the influence zone, SIZ zone, then locating those areas, cities. Because if Sundarban, there is a disaster in Sundarban, Kolkata is 20 minutes away from a disaster. Yeah. So what we are supposed to do? Jashore and Mongla right up there. What about Diamond Harbour? What about Kakdeep? So these are highly dense populations. In Kolkata metropolitan area, I'm not sure how many in this room kind of know about this. Out of the world's top 20 most populous, most dense cities, 13 are in Kolkata metropolitan area. Just think about the scale of disaster that we can face if we have, God forbid, if something happens out there. Yeah. So I think time is up with loss and damage already being discussed to think about the loss and damage in these cities around Sundarban, linking Sundarban, the driver of climate change, to the cities, and also perhaps the overall SIZ urban program. Thank you.
Thank you, Jayanta. I'll give floor to Farapa, and by the time mic reaches to her, I take that it's not a question, it's more comments in addition to the panel reports. Thank you. Farapa.
Wonderful presentations by all of you, and while I was sitting there, I was trying to think about the studies we had done with urban poor and in the slum areas, and they probably pay the highest per square, however you want to measure it, square feet, and they pay the highest for use of water. But that's not the discussion here. In terms of the urban resilience and climate impact, I think one of the missing actors here is the private sector. And in cities, these apartments, these constructions are made by the private sector. Are we able to sensitize them? Do they understand the climate dimension of infrastructure? So this was my one addition. And the other point is, in all our discussions, we have talked about multiple disasters, but earthquake is also a factor. And there was a time in 2010 when there were lots of quivers, earthquake, or I think Kolkata was also facing a few. We definitely were. Every second day we would be, feeling the tremor. Somehow it's settled down, it's not as bad, and it's dropped from the agenda. So we need to think about that as a disaster, and that impact will be huge. And I don't know how we're going to manage. So we need to look at peripheries, urban peripheries, as an alternative for emergency response. Lastly, put women and young people in the leadership, and you will see the change happening.
Thank you, Appa. Any more questions? We can take only one. No, then all I need to do is thank you, panelists. Thank you. Excellent. We managed to cover 4 countries, international perspective, introduction of the topic also, and we did receive 2 excellent comments. That certainly helps us to take our agenda forward. Thank you, everyone.